Both China and Russia dispatching intelligence gathering ships to follow the U.S. carrier deployed to the Korean Peninsula. According to Japanese officials, the USS Carl Vinson Strike Group due to arrive in the region around April 24th, ahead of the 85th anniversary of North Korea's military. Joining me tonight to discuss the Trump administration's response to North Korea's provocations, Senior Fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Anthony Ruggiero. Good to have you with us, Anthony. This is, I said earlier in the broadcast, I have never heard so much discussion about a foreign policy issue and series of events as I've heard about North Korea here over the last few weeks, and as little a discussion of concrete solutions to the crisis from the intelligentsia, from the commissariat. Your thoughts about first my comment? Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, I think a lot of people like to talk about how there are no good options with regard to North Korea policy, and certainly there are difficult choices that President Trump faces. And the toughest choice he does face is whether to cooperate or confront China, because really in the end it is the Chinese that have been aiding North Korea's sanctions evasion. And what it will take, unfortunately, because for at least the last 10 years we have not really gone after the Chinese, it will take probably significant fines against Chinese banks, which is what we did for against European banks with regard to Iran sanctions. And it will take sanctioning Chinese companies that lead these networks that allow North Korea to evade sanctions. And people don't want to have that conversation because it's certainly a difficult one to have.
Yeah, I think if I have an aversion to that conversation, Anthony, it is because I have seen economic sanctions applied against Iran. I've seen economic sanctions applied against Russia. I have not seen economic sanctions work. I think what we're trying to do is, if you will, is create some buffer between us and the consequences of what is the very bad behavior, not only of North Korea, but as you say, China. And those consequences have got to be severe. And I'm talking about issues in which we are turning over vast stores of wealth and intellectual property to the Chinese without regard for both its cost to us and the advantage it gives China in particular in any trade relationship or future geopolitical adversarial relationship.
I guess on economic sanctions, I would say, we could have a difference, we can have a discussion of whether the deal with Iran was the right direction, but I think almost everybody agrees that it was the sanctions that were successful of bringing Iran to the table. Perhaps we should have continued those sanctions and probably got a better deal on Russia. I think the issue here before President Trump is that, we placed sanctions that we knew we were going to have to tighten, and we're going to have to do additional sanctions, and the Obama administration did none of that. And so I think that's part of the problem. That's where on North Korea we see the same thing, where the UN has reported numerous times over the last 9 years several sanctions evasion, particularly in China, but in elsewhere like in Africa, and we don't close those loopholes. And it is whack-a-mole, which is like what people like to call sanctions, and you have to cultivate it, and you have to go after North Korea, and you have to be where they're going to be to evade sanctions.
Yeah, am I inferring correctly that you're saying that the Iranian deal was a satisfactory culmination to years of sanctions that had been unsuccessful in isolating Iran, even as half of Europe was doing business with Iran?
No, what I'm saying is that Iran sanctions got Iran to the negotiating table. The question that I think people have a difference of opinion on is whether the deal that was sealed was the right one. Certainly, I don't think it was the right one, and whether tightening those sanctions even more. But I wouldn't say that Iran sanctions was a failure by any stretch.
Well, as you say, people can disagree on that issue. Thank you very much, Anthony. We appreciate you being with us. Thanks.